You cleaned up your diet. You cut the sugar, dropped the alcohol, swapped the packaged stuff for whole foods, and you stuck with it. Weeks turned into months, but your joints still ache when you wake up. Your gut is bloated by noon, and when the blood work comes back, your CRP is still elevated, your body is still inflamed. You did everything right. So why is your immune system still acting like something is wrong? Here is the part nobody talks about. Inflammation is not a food problem, it is an immune problem. And your immune system does not care how clean your plate looks. It cares about what is happening inside your gut wall, inside your microbial ecosystem, inside signaling pathways you have never heard of. A perfectly clean diet can still starve the bacteria that keep inflammation in check. It can still leave your gut lining full of microscopic holes. It can still shut down anti-inflammatory signals that have nothing to do with broccoli or brown rice. The issue is not what you removed from your diet. The issue is what your gut is doing with what is left. Today, we are going through 5 hidden biological mechanisms, each one a specific way your gut generates or sustains chronic inflammation, even when your diet looks perfect on paper. These are not food swaps. These are not supplement lists. These are the actual physiological failures that gastroenterologists look for when clean eating is not enough. Mechanism by mechanism, you're going to see exactly where the breakdown happens, why restriction often makes it worse, and what clinical markers and interventions actually move the needle. By the end, you will understand the gut-level machinery that sits between your perfect plate and your persistent inflammation. Let us start with the first mechanism, and it begins with a wall you never knew you had. Your gut lining is a wall. 1 cell thick, that is it. A single layer of cells is the only thing standing between the contents of your intestines and your bloodstream. And this wall is not passive. It is held together by tiny protein locks called tight junctions. Think of them like the seal on a Ziploc bag. When the seal is tight, only what you need gets through. Nutrients pass, water passes, everything else stays out. But when those locks loosen, the seal breaks, and things that were never supposed to reach your blood start leaking through. The biggest offender is something called LPS, lipopolysaccharide. It is a fragment from the outer shell of certain gut bacteria, harmless inside your intestines. But the moment LPS crosses that broken seal and enters your bloodstream, your immune system treats it like an invader. It launches an inflammatory response. Your CRP goes up. Inflammatory molecules like TNF-alpha and IL-6 spike. And here is what makes this so hard to catch. You can have a gut wall leaking LPS into your blood with 0 digestive symptoms. No bloating, no cramping, no pain. The inflammation shows up in your joints, your skin, your blood work, but your stomach feels fine, so you never look at the gut as the source. One of the proteins that controls this seal is called zonulin, and zonulin levels rise in response to specific triggers, including gliadin, a protein found in wheat. Even in people who are not celiac, even on a clean diet that includes ancient grains or sourdough. And some of the foods people eat more of when they go clean, raw cruciferous vegetables in large amounts, high lectin legumes that are undercooked. These can further irritate a lining that is already damaged. Your gut lining replaces itself every 3 to 5 days. It wants to heal, but it needs the right building blocks to do it. L-glutamine, short-chain fatty acids, adequate mucus production. Without those, the wall keeps breaking down and resealing poorly, like patching a tire with tape. The leak continues, the immune activation continues, and your blood work keeps coming back inflamed. But what produces those short-chain fatty acids your gut wall desperately needs? Your bacteria do. And this is where the second mechanism kicks in. Most people think eating clean means eating healthy for their gut, but your gut microbiome does not care about clean. It cares about variety. Inside your colon live trillions of bacteria, and the species that matter most for inflammation are the ones that eat fiber and convert it into short-chain fatty acids, especially butyrate. Butyrate is the primary fuel source for the cells that line your colon. Without it, those cells starve. But butyrate does something else. It directly suppresses the main inflammatory switch inside your gut wall, a protein complex called NFKB. So when butyrate production drops, two things happen at once. Your gut lining loses its fuel and your inflammatory signaling ramps up. The bacteria that produce butyrate, species like Faecalibacterium prausnitzii and Akkermansia mucinifila, do not thrive on repetition. They thrive on diversity, specifically the diversity of plant fibers you eat. The American Gut Project, one of the largest microbiome studies ever conducted, found that the single strongest predictor of a healthy, diverse microbiome was not the removal of processed food. It was the number of unique plant species a person ate per week. The threshold was 30 or more. Now think about what most clean diets actually look like. The same rotation of 8 to 12 foods: chicken, broccoli, sweet potato, spinach, rice, almonds, blueberries. Clean? Sure. Diverse? Not even close. A person eating the same 10 foods on repeat can end up with less microbial diversity and more gut-driven inflammation than someone eating 35 different foods that include some processed ones. The clean eating identity tells you restriction is discipline. Your microbiome says restriction is starvation. So your gut wall is leaking. Your beneficial bacteria are starving. Those two problems alone would be enough to explain persistent inflammation. But it gets worse because your immune system is not just reacting to these problems. It is being reprogrammed by them. 70 to 80% of your immune cells live in your gut, not your bloodstream, not your lymph nodes, your gut. They are clustered in something called gut-associated lymphoid tissue, or GALT. And GALT is constantly sampling the environment, reading signals from your bacteria and your gut lining to decide how to calibrate your immune response. When everything is working, your gut bacteria produce enough short-chain fatty acids and your barrier is intact. GALT favors a balanced immune state. It produces regulatory T cells, called TREGs, that keep inflammation in check. But when butyrate drops and LPS rises, GALT shifts. It starts producing more Th17 cells, a type of immune cell that pumps out a molecule called IL-17. IL-17 drives inflammation in your joints, in your skin, in the walls of your blood vessels. This is why gut dysfunction shows up as knee pain, as eczema flares, as stiffness in your hands. The inflammation travels far from the gut because the immune programming happened in the gut. And here is the part that should stop you cold. When GALT stays inflamed long enough, it loses something called oral tolerance. That is your immune system's ability to encounter a food protein and not react to it. When oral tolerance breaks down, you start developing new food sensitivities. Foods you ate fine for years suddenly trigger reactions. So you eliminate those foods. Your diet gets more restrictive. Your microbial diversity drops further. Your GALT gets more inflamed. More oral tolerance is lost. More sensitivities appear. The expanding list of foods you cannot tolerate is not evidence that you need to cut more. It is a clinical sign that your gut immune regulation is collapsing. Restriction is not solving the problem, it is feeding the loop. There is still one mechanism hiding beneath all of this that almost no one talks about: bile acids. Most people think bile just breaks down fat. It does, but bile acids are also signaling molecules. After your liver produces them and your gallbladder releases them into the small intestine, gut bacteria convert them into secondary bile acids. These secondary bile acids activate a receptor called TGR5 on the surface of immune cells called macrophages. When TGR5 is activated, it tells those macrophages to calm down. It suppresses TNF alpha and IL-1 beta, two of the most aggressive inflammatory molecules in your body. So bile acids are not just digesting your food. They are actively putting the brakes on inflammation. Now think about what happens on a very low-fat, clean diet. Least dietary fat means less bile released. Least bile means fewer primary bile acids reaching your gut bacteria. Fewer primary bile acids means fewer secondary bile acids. And fewer secondary bile acids means TGR5 stops getting activated. The brakes come off. Inflammation runs unchecked. There is another layer. When gut bacteria cannot properly convert bile acids, the unconverted forms build up in the small intestine. This buildup is associated with small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO, which independently drives inflammation and damages the gut lining. By avoiding fat to eat clean, you can inadvertently shut down one of your gut's most powerful built-in anti-inflammatory systems. So now you can see the full picture: a leaky barrier letting toxins through, a starving microbiome unable to produce the fuel your gut wall needs, an immune system being reprogrammed toward chronic inflammation, and a bile acid signaling pathway running dry. 4 mechanisms, all interconnected, all capable of driving inflammation on a perfectly clean diet. The question is, what actually fixes this? And the answer is not another elimination diet. It is a phased repair protocol, and the sequence matters more than any single intervention. Phase 1 is barrier repair. Before you introduce new bacteria, before you diversify your diet aggressively, you seal the wall. L-glutamine at clinical doses, zinc carnosine, and adequate omega-3 fatty acids, specifically EPA and DHA, which directly influence tight junction protein expression. Phase 2 is microbial rebuilding. Once the barrier is stabilizing, you progressively increase plant diversity, not overnight. You add 5 to 8 new plant sources per week. Different fibers feed different species. Inulin, resistant starch, pectin, each one is a targeted food source for specific keystone bacteria. Phase 3 is immune rebalancing, and this is the slow phase. 8 to 12 weeks minimum. Your GALT needs sustained healthy signaling before it shifts back toward TREG-dominant regulation. And here is the most important detail. The order is everything. The same probiotic that helps in phase 3 can increase inflammation if you introduce it during phase 1. Adding bacteria to a gut with active permeability is like inviting guests into a house with no walls. They do not help. They become part of the problem. The markers that track this process are CRP for systemic inflammation and fecal calprotectin, which specifically measures inflammation in the gut lining itself. Together, they tell you whether your inflammation is gut-driven and whether the repair protocol is working. Think about where you started. You were eating clean. You were doing everything the way you were told it should be done. And your body was still inflamed. That felt like a betrayal. Now you can see it for what it actually is. 5 mechanisms running beneath the surface of that perfect plate. A gut wall with broken locks leaking toxins into your blood. a microbiome starving for variety while you fed it the same 10 foods, an immune system being reprogrammed toward attack mode because the signals it depends on dried up, a bile acid pathway shut down by the very fat avoidance you thought was helping, and a repair sequence that most people run in exactly the wrong order. None of that is solved by eating stricter. None of it is solved by eliminating another food group. If you want a concrete starting point, ask for 2 tests together: CRP, which measures systemic inflammation, and fecal calprotectin, which measures inflammation specifically in your gut lining. The combination tells you whether your inflammation is gut-driven, and that distinction changes everything about how you address it. Then shift the single most impactful part of your diet. Stop counting foods to remove. Start counting plants to add. 30 or more unique plant species per week. That is the threshold where microbial diversity starts to recover and butyrate production climbs back to levels that actually protect your gut wall and calm your immune system. Your body was never asking you to be more pure. It was asking you to understand what it actually needs: a sealed barrier, a fed microbiome, an immune system receiving the right signals, bile acids flowing, and all of it rebuilt in the right order. The inflammation was never the mystery. The mystery was why nobody showed you what was underneath it. Now you can see it.